Welcome to the People and Performance Podcast, featuring guest experts from such global brands as NASA, Salesforce, the Milwaukee Bucks, Staples Professional, IBM, Mutual of America, Xero, and Simon Sinek Inc. The show offers expert insights into the strategic capabilities and behaviors needed to grow and sustain employee performance.
Welcome to another episode of the People and Performance Podcast. Hey, this is Chris Bjorling, People and Performance Podcast co-host and president at Fidello Inc. In this episode of the People and Performance Podcast, we welcome Brian Hughes, the VP of Human Resources at First Onsite, onto the show to discuss leadership development and to share some findings from a Canada-wide workplace values survey. Bill Banham and I hope that you enjoy this conversation with Brian. And if you do, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe.
Brian Hughes, welcome to the People and Performance Podcast today.
Thank you for the welcome. It's always nice to hang out with you.
Let's get straight into it because we've got far too many questions here for you for a 15-minute episode. So I'm going to run through a bunch with you because we've got a lot to talk about today. First up, how can, in your experience, how can medium and large-size organizations foster a culture of continuous learning among HR leaders and C-level executives to adapt to a more dynamic business landscape?
Yeah, I love that question. And really where it starts is the organization needs to have a commitment and sort of a general mindset to really focus on development over just getting tasks done. I know we have to deliver results and meet our stakeholders' requirements and that, but really it comes down to that focus on people development. And then what the dynamic part is making the development in real life happen. It's not just throwing a bunch of programs out there or a bunch of webinars, whatever. Those are helpful as foundation, but really embedding the development into delivering the business results. Therefore, you meet both of those needs at the same time. And I think that's one of the most powerful and most effective approaches that businesses can take to really help make that a very dynamic landscape while developing people.
And this is why I invited you on the show, Brian, because you know your stuff. Okay, next question for you. How can HR leaders and C-level executives, Brian, better collaborate to embrace emerging HR technologies? This is a very sexy topic at the moment. Lots of people want to talk about AI and augmenting traditional jobs, etc. So how can HR leaders and C-level executives better collaborate to embrace emerging HR tech and use data-driven insights to enhance their processes such as talent acquisition, retention, and of course, succession planning?
Yeah, no, that is a very hot topic. And I totally agree with that, Bill, as well. And really, we put a huge focus on data and information. First and foremost, our foundational data point, particularly around employee engagement, is the Gallup survey and that. And we've been doing that for 7 years. And that is one of our primary data points to identify where we can focus our attention. And we're fortunate enough to have our C-suite and executives totally engaged, literally, pun intended, in the process and believing in the data. And therefore, that's one of the core ones we use. But in addition to that, we do, we call them experience surveys. So whenever someone should leave the organization, we'll interview them, we'll give them a survey and try to gather data as well so we can learn from that and make decisions on that. And that does feed information into how we recruit people, how we can position ourselves, how we can change our marketing approach. How do we focus in on the people that are with us to retain them and really focus on those core areas that the data does provide us? And then succession planning becomes very prominent because it allows us to develop systems and processes and data around skill sets, knowledge, and strengths to really help build those career paths for people and help develop this future of the business, basically, and sustainability of that. So that's kind of how we do that. And data is very critical, and it is a partnership with the business.
Excellent. Thank you. We are flying through these questions and answers today like pros, Brian. Next one for you. How can HR leaders ensure that the learning and development initiatives for C-level executives, so for the senior folks within the organization, are aligned with the organization's overall business goals and long-term vision? And also, as part of your answer, perhaps you can suggest how can people analytics assist in measuring that alignment?
Yeah, it's a great segue from the previous question as well, because I can just build on that a bit deeper on that. And certainly we have a number of different tools we use inside the organization to help identify I've referenced strengths, interests, abilities, and so forth. And having those analytics in place and then measuring it on top of outputs from the business and sort of and collaborating with that data, it really does provide that insight to reinforce the value of what we are doing around the different initiatives that support the overall direction that the C-suite pays attention to. And in one particular example, we have a tool that actually gives insight to people's preferences, behavioral thinking preferences. And then we also have the Gallup data I talked about. And what was interesting, we just did a research analysis recently internally, and we looked at those that actually had completed this tool. It's called Emergenetics, and their engagement score. It was fascinating how they did correlate. So those that actually got insight to their own profiles and preferences and shared it with people were much more engaged in the business because it really helped them be effective, but also it committed to their development and how they could be better at what they're doing as well. So we saw a direct correlation to that. And those branches in that tended to perform better as well as a team, and therefore directly impacting the effectiveness of those organizations, the sub-organizations of the business. So we're really digging in deeply on those analytics and really trying to understand how we can leverage what the more effective locations and folks are doing that we can actually make it on a much more scalable approach as well. So again, data is powerful, and taking the time and pausing really does pay off. It may seem like it may slow you down, but certainly digging into it and understanding those analytics is really going to help realign to what you're trying to achieve and what you actually pay attention to.
Okay, wonderful. Now I'd like to switch focus a wee bit because ahead of this call, your team were keen to highlight the fact that recently First Onsite commissions a workplace values survey. It was released in the summer of 2023. We're recording this episode at the very end of July 2023, so it's recently come out. And I've got a few questions for you around some of those findings. Firstly, Brian, that the report suggests that 75% of Canadians believe hybrid working is here to stay. For white collar salaried jobs, what's a good balance in terms of being in office, being remote, and being on the go, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a great question. That was one of the most interesting data points as well. And we're coming to grips with the fact that it is here to stay. The data tells us that, our internal employee feedback tells us that, and our results are telling us that hybrid actually does have a positive impact if it's managed effectively. And to your point about the balance is always a tricky one because balance means so much. There's so many variations of what does balance mean for people. And are we ever truly in total balance? I personally struggle with that sometimes. Sometimes you're focused on one side and another, personal, business, etc. However, having the remoteness does allow for building in more balance, or at least shifting your balance in personal, business, and whatever else is in your world. And I think that's what's going to help us as organizations and as people individually to really live that sort of more equilibrium in the balance of what we're trying to achieve on that. And we are on the go. Our business is on the go all the time. Like we're flying all over the North America to try to deliver the services. So quite frankly, our leaders, and particularly you pointed to the white collar workers, have that flexibility. And frankly, the hybrid is making them much more productive and effective as long as they're delivering the results. And that's what is most important. As long as the work's getting done, doesn't really matter who, where, or how, or what steps they're taking. As long as they're seeing the results, that's all that matters. And we've had a record year this year in the whole history of the company. And we've gone and stayed hybrid, and we're happy for that.
The People and Performance Podcast, supported by Fidello Inc., is dedicated to offering tips and expert insights into the strategic capabilities and behaviors needed to establish, grow, and measure the performance of employees. If you enjoy the show, why not subscribe and give us 5 stars through your favorite podcast app?
One thing that I thought was particularly interesting from the findings was that 41% of Canadians feel that they lack options for purposeful employment. This goes to the fact that you've now got a situation where the largest proportion of employees are becoming millennials and Gen Zers, of course, and they are, as generations, known for demanding purposeful
Mhm.
employment and having greater connection with the employer brand. What are some initiatives or programs that leaders should have in place to provide meaningful and purposeful roles for their employees?
Yeah, this is a very powerful question because it is foundational to everything that we actually do, and most organizations at least have some kind of a mission or a purpose statement that's defined. The key is, what do you do with that, and how do you actually mobilize people to line up towards that? And one of the most relevant ones, or most close to managers' perspective, is understanding the individual's strengths and interests and preferences. They can line up to the purpose of the organization. And that's really what becomes very impactful from a leadership perspective and an individual engagement perspective, and particularly the millennials. If they see their work as having a positive impact to support the business, but also even on a broader scale, because that's even a bigger question, is how are you impacting the community beyond your organization? That's questions we get during interviews as well. So we really put a lot of attention on building communities inside, outside. And fortunately, our work is very purposeful. We help restore, rebuild, and rise people's lives. Like, we change people's lives and what we do because of what they're going. And sometimes it's some of their worst moments in their life, and we're there for them. So we have just a natural purpose that's very meaningful and does have a positive impact on people, and we're there to actually help with that. So that in itself helps every team member, we call them, feel like they have a purpose and they're here to actually make someone's life better. And that does certainly help with the engagement, and certainly having people feel more involved and having meaningful work.
The survey also indicates that 23% of Canadians plan to quit or change their jobs in 2023, with a higher percentage among younger adults. Perhaps that talks a little bit to what we were mentioning a moment ago. How can HR leaders play a bigger role in making sure they retain their best talent, especially the younger workforce, in light of this finding?
Yeah, the one thing that we're really focusing on, and I lead the HR team in Canada, and it is a global strategy as well, is really focusing on psychological safety and partnering with business leaders to create that. That is foundational to what we've been talking about that for, well, since I've been with the organization, and even much more this past year, because we're seeing the impact of focusing on that. And I think HR can really help work and coach the people leaders in shifting their mindset a little bit. How do they create that space where people can actually speak up, share their opinion, share their needs without, the key word is, without judgment. So pausing and being curious without judgment is very powerful. And if HR leaders can help influence business leaders, working with the people leaders around help to manage their talent, you called it, engagement, and to retain them, this in itself will definitely have a direct impact on that retention. And younger folks are a little bit more demanding on being involved, being acknowledged, being recognized. That we've done that as parents. We've played a much closer role in their lives, and they're expecting the same kind of attention coming into organizations. And you just can't stick them in a cubicle and tell them what to do. Like, they want to be engaged, they want to be listened to, they want to be heard. And it goes back to your early question. They want to have meaning for the work they're doing, or also go somewhere else. As we know, the population of workers' availability is going down.
You can't just stick him in a cubicle. That's what I'm hearing from you. Okay. The next couple of questions, Brian, are questions that we ask of all of our guests. So don't worry if you find yourself repeating a little bit of what you said elsewhere. That's okay, because in addition to having these two standard questions in these episodes, we cut them up and we use them in clip show specials and all the rest of it. So the first is a challenge in 1 minute or less. Brian, can you maybe share one piece of advice or some direction that you were given by a mentor, leader, or colleague that inspired you to perform at a higher level in your career?
Yeah, I would say one of the most impactful pieces of advice that I was given is when I took on my first team management role, and I'd only been in the field for a year and took on a full team of 8 people, well in over my head in a sense. However, I remember my director at the time saying, "Brian, we pay you to think. Don't feel you need to be delivering something every moment. Pause, think critically, and then move forward. So that was, I think, very impactful for me in the fact that I don't have to be delivering something every second. I don't have to be giving an answer or advising or reporting or whatever. I can just pause and think, and that's okay.
Thank you very much. The next question, feel free to take a couple of minutes, Brian. Gosh, the luxury. And the question is as follows. From a culture and people processes perspective, what does a high-performing company mean to you?
Yeah, and I'm going to zero back in on the psychological safety element of that, because that is really and sincerely a foundation of what high performance looks like. And I've worked in a number of organizations throughout my career, and I reflect back on which ones were the highest performing, and it's the ones where we could get into some healthy, constructive discussion. I'll call it. I wouldn't even say debate, but challenge each other's thinking. Don't feel judged about that, and just truly embrace each other's opinions and value people's opinions and give people a bit of grace of who they are and their thinking, because that's where the value comes from. And then we can get to the best possible place that we can make better decisions. And really, it does impact all the things we talked about earlier. We're engaged, we're feeling more purposeful. We're having an impact. Our role is important. We are making a difference. We are contributing. We're just trying to be, it's almost goes back to, you want people to behave like real human beings with good intentions, and really trying to focus in on a common meaning or a common purpose to really deliver the performance, whatever's in front of you. And that's in any organization. And I flash back to one of the most powerful experiences I had is when we did an offsite with one of the management teams I was part of. And just the level of the facilitators that were actually doing it with us, it was in one of these green fields out in the middle of nowhere. But they said, this is one of the highest performance teams I've ever worked with, to get through the exercises, to get through the mazes, to get through the different challenges that we're given. And really, when I reflect back on it, all the stuff I just said earlier was really what made that team the highest performing team that I've ever been on. And that's what I strive for in every place that I hang my hat and hang out with the team to really try to help build that. With the foundation, once again, I can't stress enough, is if psychological safety, you can perform at any level you choose.
Perfect. Thank you. Just finally, for today's conversation. And by the way, listeners, I would encourage you to check out the conversation that I had with Brian on the HR chat pod. Of course, I will do that, because I'm not scared of promoting other pods here.
Okay.
But please do check out that one, listeners. And also, Brian's been kind enough to speak at events that we've organised in the past. So if you guys are looking for speakers, and any of you listeners are looking for speakers, Brian is awesome. But just finally for today, Brian, how can our listeners connect with you? So maybe that's email, LinkedIn, wherever you hang out on the socials. And of course, how can they learn more about First Onsite?
Yeah, so most definitely, I'm a LinkedIn fan, so that's the best and most consistent place that I hang out in. So certainly LinkedIn, reach out. I connect pretty generously to people from that perspective. And certainly firstonsite.com or .ca is a great place to check us out as well.
Wonderful. That just leaves me to say, for today, Brian Hughes, you're a lovely man. I appreciate your time. You're great at what you do. Keep doing it. Thank you very much for your time today.
Appreciate the attention. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the People and Performance Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe.